And so let's continue with the sixth chapter of A Tale of Two Cities, which is called The Shoemaker. Defarge is trying to get Manette to remember who he is. He's been locked away for 15 years. He thinks he's a shoemaker. The banker has not really helped him remember who he is, but suddenly his daughter creeps up on him and he touches her hair, and the realization is coming. He formed this speech with his lips many times before he could utter it, but when he did find spoken words for it, they came to him coherently, though slowly. "How was this? Was it you?" Once more the two spectators started as he turned upon her with a frightful suddenness, but she sat perfectly still in his grasp, and only said in a low voice, "I entreat you, good gentlemen, do not come near us, do not speak, do not move." "Hark!" he exclaimed. "Whose voice was that?" His hands released her as he uttered this cry, and went up to his white hair, which they tore in a frenzy. It died out, as everything but his shoemaking did die out of him, and he refolded his little packet and turned to secure it in his breast. But he still looked at her and gloomily shook his head. "No, no, no. You are too young, too blooming. It can't be. See what the prisoner is. These are not the hands she knew. This is not the face she knew. This is not the voice she ever heard. No, no, she was. And he was before the slow years of the North Tower ages ago. What is your name, my gentle angel?" Hailing his softened tone and manner, his daughter fell upon her knees before him, and with appealing hands upon her breast. "Oh, sir, at another time you shall know my name, and who my mother was, and who my father, and how I never knew their hard history. But I cannot tell you in this time, and I cannot tell you here. All that I may tell you, here and now, is, I pray to you to touch me and to bless me. Kiss me, oh dear, my dear." His cold white head mingled with her radiant hair, which warmed and lighted it as though it were the light of freedom shining on him. If you hear in my voice, I don't know that it is so, but I hope it is. If you hear in my voice any resemblance to a voice that was sweet music to your ears, weep for it, weep for it. If you touch, in touching my hair, anything that recalls a beloved head that lay in your breast when you were young and free, weep for it, weep for it. If, when I hint to you of a home there is before us, where I will be true to you with all my duty, and with my faithful service, I bring back the remembrance of a home long desolate, where your poor heart pined away, weep for it, weep for it." She held him close round the neck and rocked him on her breast like a child. "If, when I tell you, dearest dear, that your agony is over, and that I have come to take you from it, that we go to England to be at peace and at rest, I cause you to think of your useful life laid waste, and of our native French, and of our native France so wicked to you, weep for it, weep for it. And if, when I shall tell you my name, and of my father who is living, and my mother who is dead, you learn that I have to kneel to my honoured father, and implore his pardon for having never for his sake striven all day, and lain awake and wept all night, because the love of my poor mother hid his torture from me, weep for it, weep for it, weep for her then, and for me. Good gentlemen, thank God I feel his sacred tears upon my face, and his sobs strike against my heart. Oh, see, thank God for us, thank God!" He sunk in her arms, with his face dropped on her breast, a sight so touching, yet so terrible in the tremendous wrong and suffering which had gone before it, that the two beholders covered their faces.
when the quiet of the garret had been long undisturbed, and his heaving breast and shaken form had long yielded to the calm that must follow all storms, emblem to history of the rest and silence into which the storm called life must harsh at last. They came forward to raise the father and daughter from the ground. He had gradually dropped to the floor and lay there in a lethargy, worn out. She had nestled down with him, that his head might lie upon her arm, and her hair, drooping over him, curtained him from the light.
"If, without disturbing him,"
she said, raising her hand to Mr. Lorry, as he stooped over them, after repeated blowings of his nose,
"all could be arranged for our leaving Paris at once, so that from the very door he could be taken away."
"But consider, is he fit for the journey?" asked Mr. Lorry.
"More fit for that, I think, than to remain in this city so dreadful to him."
"It is true," said Defarge, who was kneeling to look on and hear. "More than that, Monsieur Manette is, for all reasons, best out of France. Shall I hire a carriage and post horses?" "That's business," said Mr. Lorry, resuming, on the shortest notice, his methodical manners. "And if business is to be done, I had better do it."
"Then be so kind," urged Miss Manette, "as to leave us here. You see how composed he has become, and you cannot be afraid to leave him with me now. Why should you be? If you will lock the door, to secure us from interruption, I do not doubt that you will find him when you come back, as quiet as you leave him. In any case, I will take care of him until you return, and then we will remove him straight."
Both Mr. Lorry and Defarge were rather disinclined to this course, and in favour of one of them remaining, but, as there were not only carriage and horses to be seen to, but travelling papers, and as time pressed for the day was drawing to an end, it came at last to their hastily dividing the business that was necessary to be done, and hurrying away to do it. Then, as the darkness closed in, the daughter laid her head down on the hard ground, close to her father's side, and watched him. The darkness deepened and deepened, and they both lay quiet until a light gleamed through the chinks in the wall. Mr. Lorry and Monsieur Defarge had made all ready for the journey, and had brought with them, besides travelling cloaks and wrappers, bread and meat, wine and hot coffee. Monsieur Defarge put this provender, and the lamp he carried, on the shoemaker's bench. There was nothing else in the garret but a pallet bed, and he and Mr. Lorry roused the captive and assisted him to his feet. No human intelligence could have read the mysteries of his mind in the scarred black wonder of his face. Whether he knew what had happened, whether he recollected what they had said to him, whether he knew that he was free, were questions which no sagacity could have solved. They tried speaking to him, but he was so confused and so very slow to answer that they took fright in his bewilderment, and agreed, for the time, to tamper with him no more. He had a wild, lost manner of occasionally clasping his head in his hands, and had not been seen in him before. He had some pleasure in the mere sound of his daughter's voice, and invariably turned to it when she spoke. In the submissive way of one long accustomed to obey under coercion, he ate and drank what they gave him to eat and drink, and put on the cloak and other wrappings they gave him to wear. He readily responded to his daughter's drawing her arm through his, and took and kept her hand in both of his own. They began to descend, Monsieur Defarge going first with the lamp, Mr. Lorry closing the little procession. They had not travelled many steps of the long main staircase when he stopped, and stared at the roof, round at the walls.
"You remember the place, my father? You remember coming up here?" "What did you say?"
But before she could repeat the question, he murmured an answer as if she had repeated it.
"Remember? No, I don't remember. It was so very long ago."
That he had no recollection whatever of his having been brought from his prison to that house was apparent to them. They heard him mutter,
105 North Tower.
And when he looked about him, it evidently was for the strong fortress walls which had long encompassed him. On their reaching the courtyard, he instinctively altered his tread, as being in expectation of a drawbridge, and when there was no drawbridge, he saw the carriage waiting in the open street. He dropped his daughter's hand and clasped his head again. No crowd was about the door, no people were discernible at any of the many windows, not even a chance passer-by was in the street. An unnatural silence and desertion reigned there. Only one soul was to be seen, and that was Madame Defarge, who leaned against the doorpost, knitting, and saw nothing. The prisoner had got into the coach, and his daughter had followed him, when Mr. Lorry's feet were arrested on the step by his asking miserably for his shoemaking tools and the unfinished shoes. Madame Defarge immediately called to her husband that she would get them, and went, knitting, out of the lamplight. Through the courtyard she quickly brought them down and handed them in, and immediately afterward leaned against the doorpost, knitting, and saw nothing. Defarge got upon the box, and gave the word, "To the barrier!" To the postilion cracked his whip, and they clattered away under the feeble, over-swinging lamps. Under the over-swinging lamps, swinging ever brighter in the better streets, and even dimmer in the worse, and by lighted shops, gay crowds illuminated coffee-houses and theatre doors, to one of the city gates. Soldiers with lanterns at the guard-house there. "Your papers, travellers! See here, then, monsieur, the officer," and Defarge getting down and taking him gravely apart. "These are the papers of monsieur inside, with the white head. They were consigned to me with him and the—" He dropped his voice. There was a flutter among the military lanterns, and one of them, being handed into the coach by an arm in uniform, the eyes connected with the arm looked not an every day, or even an every night look, at monsieur with the white head. "It is well. Forward!" from the uniform. "Adieu!" from Defarge. And so, under a short grove of feebler and feebler overswinging lamps, out under the great grove of stars, beneath the arch of unmoved and eternal lights, some so remote from this little earth that the learned tell us it is doubtful whether their rays have even yet discovered it, as a point in space where anything is suffered or done, the shadows of the night were broad and black, all through the cold and restless interval until dawn. They once more whispered in the ears of Mr. Jarvis Lorry, sitting opposite to the buried man who had been dug out, and wondering what subtle powers were forever lost to him, and what were capable of restoration, the old inquiry, "I hope you care to be recalled to life?" The old answer, "I can't say." End of the first book.